Welcome to the Way of the Spiritual Path. My name is Ursula Lantini, and this is our guest, Dr. Robert Springer. Today's show is the last episode of season 1. I've done over 20 shows, and so have my colleagues, everybody here on the Lighter Side Network. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, for supporting us. Without you, it doesn't happen. The Way of the Spiritual Path is talking about the way in which our spiritual paths individually show up, because the spiritual path is an individual process, and each person's process is different. But there's a way about the path that's common for all people. Dr. Springer is medically trained. He's an MD. He has his own private practice, which is quite rare in today's world. Many of the pharmaceutical companies put a lot of pressure on doctors. The hospitals kind of absorb doctors, so many doctors are affiliated with a larger corporation. Dr. Springer is almost like that tried and true, holding out, the last stand type of person, because he believes in his practice to be done in a certain way, and his approach is very holistic. In our inner work, we've explored very many creative parts. So even though he's a doctor, Dr. Springer is one of those people who I call like an accelerated human being, a brilliant person, because they are fearless in their field. They are intelligent. Your knowledge base is incredible. You have an excellent sense of humor, and you're an artist. Your walls in your office are filled with art, and you paint yourself. You're always decorating, redecorating. You wear awesome jewelry. So there's an aspect of you that is whole within yourself. You have a healthy relationship with your children and with your husband. So these are things that really your personal way of life, of being, you bring into your practice. So this episode, we're going to be talking about your inner work that we've done together and how that has been an experience for you. So what benefits, let's talk about that first. What benefits have you seen in doing this work?
Personally, as far as the idea of a spiritual path goes, you have accelerated me on my path. Knowing that I needed to be on a path predated meeting you. And a lot of my spiritual work was me finding my way through my own Christian values and my own practice of Christianity within the churches that I've been a member of as an adult. That was a very personal project and journey that I owned myself, because as a child I really didn't have any kind of spiritual or religious grounding. Certainly minimal sort of structure as far as church or religion, and no discussion or modeling for following a spiritual way.
Okay, so it's very self-discovered in
So
your
it's been
adult
very
world.
self-initiated and self-driven, and I had done my own reading. I had done my own exploring in terms of formal religions, found my way into owning my Christianity and feeling very solidly connected with a God that is speaking to me through that framework and through that structure. I've also done a lot of personal work in a psychotherapeutic environment with traditional therapists, both individually and then couples counseling, both at the end of my first marriage and the beginning of the second one. So I've had that element of growth that was very important to me and that I hold dear, and in certain circumstances still recommend that that's a great tool for other people who are trying to find their way.
Because you counsel your clients, your patients, to, come see me or go get this done or start doing yoga or have a conversation with so on. You're not only addressing their medical needs.
Absolutely.
Because that's how you live.
because that's how I live.
Right.
Yeah, for me, it is about integrity. And my personal integrity is literally that. It's integration. It's making sure that all of the parts are working together. And I think everyone is searching for integrity. Everyone's searching for everything within themselves to be in balance. And everyone is somewhere on a path looking for where the next step needs to be. And part of my role as a healer, which I use as a broader term, encompassing physician, my role is to help people deal with whatever it is that they're bringing to the table when they're meeting me for my work as a medical doctor. But there's always that broader work of healing where I'm identifying somebody's need to move on the path. And that's always part of it.
Yeah. So you were saying the work that we do together, the subconscious work, has brought you to an even further knowingness within your spiritual awareness.
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, interesting that just this last Sunday had the most fabulous sermon from a young priest in our church that I admire greatly. I think she's really, as a younger priest, coming into her own and delivering, knockout sermons that just have a wow factor to them. And on this very most recent Sunday, the sermon was regarding the gospel reading for this previous Sunday was the parable of the weeds in the field. And the concept that, all of our existence is a combination of things that we've planted, things that we want to grow, the things that are valuable to us. And then somewhere along the way, somebody planted a bunch of weeds in there too. And ultimately, what is our task in this lifetime in terms of dealing with the things that we're growing and the weeds that are there along with?
Yeah.
And the things that we're all growing are the things that we hold dear and that we want to happen for us. We're growing being a great parent. We're growing being a great child to our parents. We're growing into being the kinds of professionals we want to be or doing the kind of work that we think is valuable to this lifetime and this universe. We're all trying to grow those things. And then in there are the weeds,
the programs,
the things that happened, the things that have sprouted up, the traumas, the fears, the jealousies that are interfering with our growth in the things that we're really trying to accomplish for ourselves.
And our own belief systems of who we've been told who we are and, not good enough and so on and so forth, the low self-esteem.
Yeah.
So as you do the work, the internal family systems work, the subconscious work together, what are you discovering in your life?
Well, it all clicked for me while I was listening to this sermon because our priest was talking about how our work in this life is not to be chopping those weeds down, but to simply transform them. And for me, I take a little different look at it. I'm not so much trying to transform the weeds as simply make use of them. To turn their existence into something that makes me better. And what I realized as I was listening to her sermon was, that's what Ursula does. She's helping me to meet my weeds. And that really is that and the transformational aspect, that the looking at the weeds and then saying, well, what good can come of this? How do I go ahead and take that fear or that jealousy and dissipate it or transform it into some kind of drive for something that's even better and helping out the things that we're trying to grow.
So an example that comes to mind is your octopus character.
I've met a lot of characters with you.
Yes, we have.
Well, the octopus, the raven, and then even the
Carnival
the
guy,
carousel,
yeah.
and the scary clown carnival carny guy running it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there's all sorts of people in here, and that's where the work that I've done with you has really helped to bring home my desire for integration, because even in the previous psychotherapeutic work that I've done, I may have identified this fear, this jealousy, some aspect of my personality that was interfering with my growth and with the ability to accomplish things I wanted to accomplish. But it never progressed past knowing it,
Right.
like seeing it.
We can identify it. So, like in traditional therapy, we can process and identify, oh, yes, this was a major turning point in my life. This was the trauma that really shaped me. Or this is my belief system. These are my 5 core beliefs that I'm dealing with all the time. And we can talk about it and process it. But that's only with our conscious mind, which is
Correct.
10%.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the subconscious, because you can't go to this, you can't have a conscious conversation with the subconscious. We have to go into the subconscious and have a subconscious to subconscious conversation.
And which is why, in my experience, I see people who can spend years in therapy and they've got this idea that, oh, I've already visited that, I'm over it. And from everything they say, everything they are, everything they exude, they're totally not over the thing that is holding them back. And it's because they've identified it, but they've never really met it.
Right, or healed it.
And that's the difference in the work that we've done together, is that I've met those parts and really been able to sort of size up the good and the bad, further understand where, those things came from, and then capitalize on the meeting.
Exactly. So I bring up the octopus because that's your task doer.
Multitasker.
You're a multitasker.
He's my multitasker.
Right. Because you have such a colorful expression of yourself. You're an artist, you're a medical doctor, you're very intelligent, you're interested in so many different aspects of life. You have beautiful relationships. And so everything's always in fluid movement. And the octopus keeps up with that because he's got the 8 arms. And your octopus is quite confident in doing whatever you give to him to do. And just like a company, running a company or a business or an office, everybody interacts with another, and everyone affects one another.
Right.
So if one of your other parts are like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, the octopus is like, okay, but can you? I'm working really hard right now. I'm working really hard right now.
The octopus is busy handling all of the things that I want to get done, but then there's that raven, the pecker, that is needling on one thing or another to some extreme that even the octopus is feeling like, I can't get all this done. You're expecting, this other part is expecting too much on this one issue. And
so in dealing with trying to help the octopus do its job effectively and efficiently and not get stressed out or make one of your other parts too tired that you can't keep up with the demand, it's not even to deal with the octopus, but to go to the raven, the crow, and say, okay, what's your issue? Why are you picking on everybody so much? And then do the healing work there and understand, like you said, where
because the octopus for me is more one of the plants I want to grow and I want to flourish and I want to be well. The raven, on the other hand, had much more the character of a weed. The raven was somebody that definitely needed to be transformed, and we did that. I mean, when we were done revisiting him, that was already a bird of a different color.
Yes.
And one that was much more relaxed, one that was much more willing to fly than to peck.
Yes.
And that was the key aspect of the kind of work that you've done with me, is that moving beyond identifying, then we can transform and change and utilize for the better some of those impulses. The other thing that I think is important about the work, which really stood in distinction to my previous experience, was it was easy enough at the beginning of our work to identify the part in me that was the 9-year-old boy. The 9-year-old boy being programmed by his mother for this kind of academic success, this kind of expectation. But there would have been no way for me to have ever identified the 3-year-old boy in me. I mean, that's just totally pre-verbal, totally off the radar in terms of conscious memory. And yet, clearly, there were occurrences, events, huge shifts in my existence between the age of 2 and 3 that carried over all the way to my 50s now with the fear factor, the insecurity, the worry, all of that goes back so early, and I never really would have been able to have touched on that.
That's right.
In a straightforward, common psychotherapeutic approach.
Even in life itself. I mean, we can journal all we want, we can talk to our friends all we want, we can walk in the woods all we want.
Well, it wasn't a foreign concept to me because I knew that at the age of 2 that I had immigrated from one country to another, and that it was a radical shift, and that it had to have affected me. And that's as far as I went. It was just this one conscious idea that might have been important to me. But then in the work that we did, I was identifying that toddler in me, and the bewilderment and the fear, and able to go ahead and take that toddler by the hand and say, hey, you're part of this, group. You're part of me, who includes the 9-year-old boy and, the octopus and the transformed bird and the carousel and the lights and the colors and all of the things that make me up. I was able to grab that child, and it really has made me own courage and fearlessness in a way that I never had before meeting you.
Because what happens too when you were saying like the fear and the insecurity, those things, when they're early onset, they've been put into our system, we think that they're normal and natural.
Right.
So after you do the healing and you say, now I have courage and now I have this fearlessness, it also has affected your business. Because you changed your business model after we did quite a bit of work. So you were already on track to say, okay, this business model isn't working. Corporate hospitals and pharma is really pushing down on me. I'm just going to have to make a break here and do something different. In the meantime, we were doing the internal work, and very naturally, the transformation happened where you were having an old model and then you went into a brand new model, and it was pretty seamless. Everyone jumped on board. You felt confident about going through that. And as a doctor, there's only really one model. Like, how can you create a new model?
This was a huge shift, and yet it felt totally organic, because ultimately the shift came just as my opening my medical practice 14 years ago on a traditional model, just opening my own practice was a big shift from the idea of being an employee of some other medical entity, corporation or whatever. I made that shift because it was important to my integrity. It was important to me being who I need to be in a private practice environment. And then ultimately, with the changes in healthcare in this country, it became necessary to shift from that model to something that's pretty unique and not well known and understood, and make that something that helps enact me as an individual, and therefore enact me as a healer.
Wonderful.
And it does.
Wonderful. Yeah. So any closing comments about your inner work? How valuable it's been, or...
It's priceless. You can't quantify, being integrated and being whole. It's the goal. And ultimately, we want to be whole in this life, and we want to be whole with our God and the universe. And increasingly, I'm reaching the goal that I had identified for myself years ago of being somebody who everything I do is connected to one philosophy, to one overarching goal of being better and doing better. And I feel like I am that now. I am better, I'm doing better, and I'm constantly in connection with and fueled by the divine. And it just doesn't get any better than
It
that.
doesn't. That's awesome.
And I thank you for that.
I thank you for that. Working with you has been a delight, a charm. I really, not knowing what's going to happen next, who's going to say what next, being fascinated by the depth that you come from and the creativity and your pure heart. So thank you for joining me in my life, and thank you for joining us on this show,
My
The
pleasure.
Way of the Spiritual Path. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've gathered a lot of quality from meeting Dr. Springer, and you can find his practice here in Atlanta, and I highly recommend getting help from him. He can even do phone consultations or video consultations, even if you're not living nearby. Dr. Springer is an excellent doctor. He heals the whole person. So people come to him with an illness or something physical, and he's like, well, I have a prescription for that, but in the meantime, let's address the cause. So thank you again, Lighter Side Network, The Way of the Spiritual Path.